Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And I'm so happy to have with me again Jerry Marzinsky, who's no stranger to the show anymore. And we're going to have Anon. We don't give the gentleman's name. He's just anonymous. Welcome, guys, and thank you so much for joining me. And I know, Jerry, you've had a bit of a tussle coming in. If you guys remember from the last shows we've done, Jerry couldn't get in a couple of times, so we actually had to go over to Zoom. So I was fully expecting to do that again. But hey, you're in, and I'm very, very grateful. How are you, gentlemen? Nice to have you join me on this Saturday. Well, evening for me. I know it's morning for you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're doing well. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And I'm super excited about, again, I think these topics, Jerry, that you've been bringing to the fore are super, super interesting and really groundbreaking. I mean, it's groundbreaking information that you are giving us now. And I think it's amazing because I think it's helped just to hear this is helping so many people. Anon and I were actually just talking a little bit off air, and we were just saying where the planet is right now. The dark forces hate to lose control, and really, what's happening at the moment is they're losing control because there's so much light coming onto the planet, and we are the light. The humans, our consciousness is the light. It's like every time we wake up, another light goes on, right? And of course, they don't like that. So they're coming at us in full force. And if we can just realize that's what's happening, there's actually no reason to fear anything. So the more we have these types of conversations and the more people like yourselves come out and share these stories, the better it is for everyone at the end of the day. So, Jerry, I'm just going to maybe hand over to you again, because maybe you can just give us an outline again from, also we've had previous shows, but just give us an outline and then we'll hand over to Anon and hear his story. Super excited to hear about that as well.
Okay, my name is Jerry Marzinsky, and I spent probably almost 50 years on the front lines of mental health here in the United States. I've worked in every kind of facility that they have here: state hospitals, private psychiatric hospitals, mental health centers. Spent the last 10 years doing psych crisis and hospital emergency rooms. So I've seen it all. And the entire time I was studying the voices that schizophrenics hear. Okay. Now that's something that the psychiatric mafia has not done. They have just come out and went, we're psychiatrists, we hereby proclaim that the voices are hallucinations. Okay? When you start looking closer into them, they are not hallucinations. They're not word cabbage. They're not just garbage. They're not random bits of language. These entities, these voices that these schizophrenics hear, speak in complete sentences. They carry on conversations with the patient. I've carried on many conversations with them through patients. They are thinking, living entities. Now, this isn't something that psychiatry and big pharma want to hear. They want you to believe that this is a biochemical imbalance of the brain that is causing paranoid schizophrenia, and the voices are caused by this biochemical imbalance of the brain. That was a lie made up by Eli Lilly in the 70s when they came out with Prozac. They knew it was a lie at the time, but they promoted it anyway to sell their drug Prozac. Okay, it has since been disproved. If you don't believe it, any of you who are taking psychiatric medicines for schizophrenia, look and see if any psychiatrist gave you any kind of test to determine the baseline of your brain chemical balance ahead of time. There is no objective test. There is no test whatsoever, no blood work, no EEG, no EKG, nothing to determine what chemicals are out of balance in the brain or by how much. It doesn't exist. So when psychiatry goes to give people they give you a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, you won't see them give you a test. You ask them this, oh, your brain is out of balance. You won't see them give you a test to determine what's out of balance or by how much. They don't know
Exactly.
what the chemical balance of the brain actually should be. They don't know what's out of balance or by how much. It's all a fabrication. It's not true. And it's been disproved over and over and over. But they're still pushing it. You'll see it in the advertisements. So again, I want to repeat that these voices, if you look at them, anybody who works with schizophrenics, anybody who has a schizophrenic son or daughter, these voices run set, repeatable patterns. Hallucinations don't do that. They're random. Okay. So common patterns these voices run, there's 23 of them. You can see them on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. But they're consistently negative. They don't say anything positive. Right? The question is, what holds them on such a negative trajectory? Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? Right? They're consistently, persistently negative. They're anti-religious. They don't want the person going to church. They act up when the person reads the Bible. They act up when you go to a preacher. They act up when you read any kind of spiritual material. They get louder in church a lot of the times. They drown out the preacher. What kind of hallucination would do that? Right? They foster negative emotion, and they'll take any crisis and they'll pour gasoline on it to inflame the fire. They energetically drain their victims. So if you have a schizophrenic around you, ask them how much energy they have before the voices come, how much they have afterward. All right. What psychiatry is telling us is total garbage. The voices are not hallucinations. They have no research to show that they are. They don't want to hear this. They want to just keep selling drugs. They're selling $7 billion worth of antipsychotic drugs worldwide every year. They have no interest in finding a cause for paranoid schizophrenia. The Mental Health Association here in the U.S. has cut their research for monies for schizophrenia down to a mere dribble. Big Pharma does not want a cure. They want to keep treating symptoms with these expensive toxic medications. Okay? So I'm going to turn things over to Anon right now. Now, Anon, when he was a young man, he had a schizophrenic break, ended up in a psychiatric hospital for a length of time, struggled with the voices, kind of inferred what they are, and he broke free of schizophrenia. So what psychiatry tells patients they diagnose with schizophrenia all too often is that it's a lifelong sentence. There is no cure. All you can do is take their toxic medications. This is far from true. I've seen a number of people completely break free of schizophrenia. There's things that you can do. It takes a lot of work and a lot of desire to break free, but you can do it. It's happened over and over and over again. Okay? Let me turn the show over to Anon, and I'll just be jumping in from time to time.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jerry. So, yes, I consider myself a recovered schizophrenic. I was diagnosed as having schizoaffective disorder back about 1990. And every time Jerry talks about what he's discovered with the patterns and his experiences in treating schizophrenia, I can relate. I remember going through some of those things, especially about the notion of it just being a brain chemical imbalance. When I was in a psychiatric ward, I heard the same thing from the physicians that were working with me. They said, well, your brain chemistry is off balance. You have to bring it, these drugs will bring it back in place. And I asked them, well, then what's the baseline? If you have a swimming pool, you measure the pH, the acidity of your swimming pool, and you adjust it accordingly. The same should be for brain chemistry. When I asked that question, like, well, what's the baseline supposed to be then? They just gave me blank stares. They didn't have any answers for that. So my experience started after I graduated college. I got a degree in mechanical engineering. So I come from a very rational, logical mindset. interesting enough, I'd also taken a few college courses on abnormal psychology. So I was aware of some of these different diagnoses done through the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM. So when I got out of college, I kind of wanted to explore the Bible a little bit. I was baptized Greek Orthodox, went to Protestant Sunday schools, and attended a Roman Catholic youth group. So I had a little bit of variety of some of the Christian-based religions, and I always kind of felt there was a common thread between all of them and other religions out there. So I started reading the Bible just to kind of eliminate any middlemen. I want to see what it said for myself, and that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. I found at times, I admit, I felt Christ-like, and then other times I felt like I was being dragged to the darkest depths of hell. Things started to talk in my mind, to start to tell me how worthless I was, how to give up your life mission or what you want to do in the future is worthless. Don't bother going in this direction. At the same,
these are common things that they say. You're no good, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're ugly, nobody likes you, nobody loves you. It's all negative stuff consistently.
Was this Anon? Was this the first time you experienced that? I mean, you know, you had nothing when you were a kid or a young boy or something like that. So what you're saying is when you were sort of studying the Bible was the first time you started experiencing these types of voices. And from what you're telling, from what you're saying, it seems like it was the complete polar opposite of each other, right?
Right. And a lot of times, like when somebody enters the mid-20s, that's kind of what I think they start kind of questioning what they want to do in life, who they are, where they want to go. And I was starting to go through some existential crises at the same time. I was kind of asking myself, what is life all about? What's the meaning of things? What is purpose? And there's a lot going on in my head at the time. I think a lot of suppressed dysfunctionality occurring in my family was coming up to the surface too. So everything was happening simultaneously. It's like the mind was on overload. And that's a common trend with a lot of people with schizophrenia, is that they come from kind of a dysfunctional family environment, or they've suffered severe trauma. And I believe that these traumatic experiences actually opens up fissures or cracks in one's psyche, which allows these voices or entities, if you want to call them that, to breach and get in. They're almost like vultures or sharks. They see that there's a wounded target and they go for it to try and see to feed off them. And
I agree.
It's not really sure if they're feeding off the negative energy or if it's a drug for them, if it's like some sort of stimulus where one can look at it either way. So going back, I was reading the Bible very intensely, and just a lot of things started happening. Like it almost at times felt like something was trying to take over my body or my mind. Very much like a possession was occurring. And I was trying to fight this off. And as I mentioned, I had taken abnormal psychology, so I was aware of what schizophrenia was about. And I remember at the time of going through these occurrences, I said, wow, I know what my textbooks had said, but this feels like something's trying to take over my personality or my body or my mind.
Now, did it interfere with you reading the Bible? Was there a lot of distraction? Did it?
Well, it was definitely fighting for my attention. It was trying to take my focus off. I mean, it got to the point where sometimes I couldn't even think anymore. I mean, I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, and there was times I couldn't even do mathematics, so I couldn't add 2 + 2. My mind was so overwhelmed or drained from what these voices or strong thoughts were saying. And at this point in time, I was going back and forth, were these my own thoughts, or was this something external of me putting these thoughts into my head? I was going back and forth. Is this some sort of spiritual experience, or is this just my mind just playing tricks on me and creating some sort of madness type of thing? So I had a lot of cognitive dissonance going on at the time. I wasn't sure what was going on. Part of me was treating it as a spiritual religious battle, something authentic and genuine. The other part of me was just thinking, I'm a mad person. This is just the insanity of my mind playing tricks on me. So I was going back and forth on this. So it reached a point that, and with schizophrenia, it's a whole combination of things. I mean, you can be depressed, I think a little bit manic, a little bit depressive. It fluctuates back and forth. I wouldn't call it a clear-cut category. And I'm not so sure DSM properly classifies people who have it for what they're going through. But I did reach a point, I got so depressed from being told how worthless I was, how nobody would want to be my friend. I had absolutely no value to offer the world. That, I mean, I started to see in black and white. I couldn't see colors anymore. I was not eating. And finally, what happened, I was going to getting some initial therapy, and had put me on a low dose of lithium. But I was crashing. I mean, I was psychologically crashing from all the torments of what was going on in my head and the trauma being stirred up of my past and that sort of thing. And what happened is my body started thrashing. I remember my arms and legs were thrashing around, moving back and forth. And I didn't feel like I was the one moving them. I mean, my arm would kind of move or lift up, and I wasn't the one making the motor actions in my head to do so. So based on those body thrashing movements, I was admitted to the emergency room of a normal general local hospital. And I remember they gave me an MRI, some of the other tests and scans, just to rule out that it wasn't something neurological. And they wanted to make sure, I think it wasn't an overdose of lithium. And I don't think that came back in the chemical blood work that I had an overdose of lithium. If anything, because I was so depressed, I couldn't even remember to take the lithium half the time. So they concluded it was psychological. So I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, and I remember they would ask me all sorts of questions like, are you hearing voices? And what's your name? And when they asked me the question about, are you hearing voices? I would say, I am, but it's just my mind playing tricks on me, because I felt like I wasn't sleeping. And that's the thing about these strong thoughts or entities. They try and exhaust their target or victim. They don't want them to get sleep. They want they want them to be vulnerable.
That's a pattern. That's a consistent pattern.
And I remember the hospital staff kept asking what my name was. I was getting a little annoyed because I'm thinking, they have their charts there. They should know what my name is. And then I realized they weren't asking what my name was for their sake. They were asking it for my sake. They wanted to make sure that I was still, connected with who I was born, the name, who I was on my birth certificate, that I hadn't disassociated of who I was. I always knew who I was. It was just, but battling these very strong thoughts back and forth, it was unnerving. So their solution was to basically, you're treated as a guinea pig. They gave me all sorts of pills to try on different days. It was like, I remember pink ones, octagon shaped ones, oval ones, combinations of this and that. And they were trying to kind of snap me out of my state or my condition.
Now, Anon, the voices you heard, did they sound any different from, I mean, the content was very different, but did they sound any different from your regular stream of thoughts that you have? I mean, was there any change in intonation or did it, where the voices or anything, or did they sound just like your regular stream of thought, except the content and the intent was very different?
No, they sound like your stream of thought, because I remember most of the time I was always on the fence. Were these my own thoughts, or is this something different coming in?
Right, and that's a struggle that all schizophrenics face, because they sound just like the regular thoughts you have running through the thousands of thoughts you have running through your mind every day. They sound just like them, but the intention and the information are very different. So people believe that because they hear thoughts in their head, they believe that they belong to them. Just because they hear them in their head. So who else could they belong to? That's far from true. These thoughts are coming in from outside. Your brain is like a radio receiver. They're not your thoughts. These entities are inserting them into your thought stream. And I've had a number of patients ask the voices, who are you? What are you? And they would respond, we are you. They want you to believe that they are them. If you start listening to them, you start behaving, doing what they say, you get yourself in a lot of trouble. And you eventually, if you keep doing it, you will become like them.
I think that's the number one key to recover from schizophrenia. As soon as you come to the conclusion, realization that those voices are not you, that it is something from external of you, that's when the healing can begin. Because now you've got the recognition that, okay, these voices are trying to take over my personality. They're trying to merge and become part of me.
Right. They're not me. They're an enemy. Okay. I had one guy write me. He said, thank you for what you're doing. I needed to understand that these voices weren't me. I've got it from here. And he disappeared.
It was, what I'm hearing you say, Anon, as well, which I think is probably was maybe part of your saving grace and probably part of your studies as well, is that you knew what you were dealing with. So you had a cognitive thought process around, is it me or isn't it me? You kept questioning. And I think people who don't understand that don't question that. They just assume it's them, right? And
They're
that's
in
where they
trouble.
kind of get, yes, and they
Yep.
get sucked into that black hole then. And that's the danger. You had that cognitive awareness about, is it me? Isn't it me? What is going on here? And other people, as I said, I think, and that's where people who are unaware get sucked in. I'm watching some of the comments in the chat here as well, and people talking about, someone is speaking about her aunt that had something like that, and no one believed, no one believed what she was saying, but no one understood it, so no one could help her. And that's just the sad part. Nowadays, there is awareness around this, and there are people who know better, which is a blessing. So again,
Yeah,
thank you for what you
so
guys
people
are doing.
are going to recover. They have to understand that those voices are not them. They're separate
Yes.
from them. They're an enemy. Because like you said, Chantelle, if they believe it's them, then they become the voices. And that's what the
Right.
voices want.
Now,
Exactly.
Jerry, you'd mentioned, if the tone or inflection of the voices changed, they did not. But I will say this much: I felt like I went through an adversarial hierarchy or various levels of management where the vocabulary that they were using and the tone was changing depending on which entity I think that I was interacting with. But the actual, I would say, the pitch or how they sounded like my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. And there are levels of them. There's overlords that rule the soldiers that are kind of assigned to destroy certain individuals. They are malicious forces. They're out to destroy you. They hate mankind. Absolutely hate mankind.
Right.
So
Right.
prior to my entrance in the psychiatric hospital, I believe I was dealing with the lower echelons, the lower ranking foot soldiers. Afterwards, I think I was dealing with the higher management. So I was in the psychiatric hospital, and those medications that they give you, they're tranquilizers. They just mask the symptoms. They don't do anything to actually treat or cure the patient.
Yeah, they don't
And
get rid of the voices.
they make you just kind of feel like very stupor. And these are not the type of medicines that you want to do from a recreational standpoint. They're
No,
awful.
no.
It can make your mouth extremely dry. I remember feeling like lead feet where I couldn't even lift up my legs. There's some days I don't even remember being when I was in the hospital because what the drugs were doing. And I can remember sometimes one particular combination of drugs that they given me, I would turn my head and the scenes would shift to catch up with where I was looking. And that can make you very disoriented and dizzy. And they would keep switching the medicines around based on the results. You're a guinea pig. They didn't know which ones
Yes.
were going to work.
Yep. They'll try one. If that doesn't work, they'll try another, and they'll just keep doing that round and round and round until they find one they think works the best. But nobody's being cured.
Now, I remember lying in my room in the psychiatric hospital, and you're lying in bed, but you're not sleeping. I mean, when you go to sleep, there's a lot of the night that you don't remember because you're dreaming or doing other things as your body resets. In this state, I felt like I wasn't sleeping at all. I mean, things were so active in my brain with these voices and what was going on back and forth. But I remember there was one time in the hospital, the voices got very, very, very strong. It was like a super attack. A good analogy is like when you're in a movie theater or about to see a play start, and you're in the audience and everybody's having their conversations going back and forth before the play starts. They're talking on their cell phones, talking to their relatives or the friends around them. That's what it was like. It was like hundreds of these voices back and forth, like going after me. And at this point, it started to sound like it was almost outside of myself, like not in my head at that point. And I kept I would try to ignore them or just fight them off as best I could from a mental standpoint. But I remembered the voices, it became less and less the number of voices. And then it became kind of almost this final committee that were talking among themselves of kind of what they were going to do about me or how to deal with me. But I remember one voice distinctly saying, "What are we going to do about him?" When they were talking, and then these voices were talking to the other voices. Now I call them voices, but I also refer to them as entities, non-corporeal entities. That's another way of looking at it. It's just really just basically semantics of how I used to describe them. So none of the pills or medications were working. I think my health insurance was about to run out. I was in there for at least 3 to 4 weeks. They decided to resort to electroconvulsive therapy, known as ECT. And what they would do is they would give you a muscle relaxant, and they have to put you on a respirator because the muscle relaxants are so strong it stops your diaphragm from going up and down. You can't breathe. And then they would give you general anesthesia, basically knock you out, then put a voltage across your brain. Now, the time I did this is probably 1990. It wasn't the severe torture of what Jerry probably witnessed back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
It was ugly.
And they told me after the ECT that I would probably have some short-term memory loss. But I remember after the very first ECT, I woke up, I felt better. My mind was clear. I felt like I had a clean slate. I wasn't hearing all the noise of the voices or thoughts. I felt like, okay, I can start rebuilding myself now as a human being. I was still at rock bottom, but at least it was like I felt so much more like myself.
See, what I saw with ECT at the hospital is it was much more brutal than what you experienced. I mean, but they would run a big shock through the patient's head. They'd have them completely strapped down. But what was interesting, okay, electricity is energy. Okay, for a few days after the ECT shock, the voices for the most part were gone. They would come back, but they'd be gone for a short period of time. And I found that very interesting. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but I did notice that they were gone for a day or 2 or 3 days, and then they slowly came back.
So they insisted that I have to have a total of 6 ECT treatments, even though I was feeling much better with the first one. So it was alternate days. I remember the first one was on a Monday, next one was on a Wednesday and a Friday. Then I was an outpatient after that because I was discharged, and I was still outpatient. So I had a total of 6 ECT treatments. And I felt a lot better, like I was able to rebuild myself. And Jerry's right. The voices came back. They came back to me probably about 2 to 3 months later. But it was a different approach this time. I remember it started almost like a series of trials of tribulations. And throughout this ordeal too, I mean, I was suicidal in my head. There were a lot of thoughts telling me to kill myself, you didn't deserve to exist. And I remember one of the thoughts or entities kept telling me how they would tell you how to go about killing yourself. Like one wanted me to climb up a high electrical tension wire, like one of those tall, high voltage electrical towers, and jump into the wires. Another one was trying to get me to do it by carbon monoxide poisoning, hooking up pipes to my car exhaust. I came very close to doing it, I will admit, but I think higher power stepped in and stopped me from going through with it.
See, and that's common too. Most of these voices at some point will tell the person to kill themselves. You know, they'll tell them how to do it. In the United States right now, there's close to 50,000 suicides every year, year after year after year. That's the number of people who've died in Vietnam. A great many of those people are on antidepressants and antipsychotic medications. We got more medications, psychiatric medications on the planet now than in the history of mankind, and the population is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. The incidence of schizophrenia and mental illness is soaring. What they're doing is not working.
Yeah.
So I was on a low dose of Klonopin at this point in time, which they explained to me was a mood stabilizer. So I'm approaching about January of 1991. I mentioned how the voices or very strong thoughts came back, and it was interesting. As I mentioned, I started going through a series of stages, or almost like tribunals. I don't know if they were initiations, I don't know if it was torments or tortures, but something was offering me a quick path to wealth, riches, fame, power. Basically, it was offering me mammon, the riches of this world. And here it was that I'd been reading the Bible kind of rather intensely a year or so earlier. And now some voice in my head is kind of making me the same offer that Jesus Christ had allegedly gone through with the 40 days in the desert when he was tempted by the devil. And here I am being tempted with these riches, and instantaneous material wealth, basically the items of this material world. And they were kind of trying to make me take this offer. But I felt like I'd have to sell my soul to it. I didn't feel like the offer was being made from something that was necessarily looking out for my best interest. And I turned the offer down. And I remember these voices, they were furious with me that I wasn't accepting their offer. I mean, they kept putting it forth, and it was tempting. I mean, I was in a broken state. My income was below poverty that year. I was below poverty level that year. I had the stigma that comes along with being diagnosed of having schizophrenic affective disorder, and I had to rebuild my life from that. I was at rock bottom, but I said no to this offer. I just felt like there was a better future ahead to avoid it. And this is part of the cognitive dissonance going on in my head. It's like, oh my gosh, these voices are offering me the same thing that Jesus Christ went through, being tempted by the devil. I'm thinking, well, I must be mad in my head. This is truly madness. So then the next stage, and each of these stages would last probably about a month and a half or so, it would start making me feel extreme guilt and shame for the most littlest of sins that I ever committed in my life. They would focus on every ant, fly, or worm that I'd ever killed. They would point out what a terrible being that I and humanity are. You know, we eat the flesh of other animals and that sort of thing. And I started arguing against these voices or strong thoughts. I said, okay, you know, humanity is horrible because we eat the flesh of other animals. I said, but other animals have teeth, tongue, and mouth, and they eat other animals. I said, how can you sit here and attack us like this when God made other animals do the same thing? And I would tell these voices or thoughts, take your argument to God, or the highest essence of what I thought God was. Take it to him or her, not to me. I remember as a kid, I used to go fishing. And of course, you have to bait the earthworm onto the hook to catch the fish. I would catch sunnies or bass or trout or that sort of thing. These voices or thoughts kept digging that up from my mind, telling me how horrible I am. You know, I killed this earthworm by putting on the hook to catch the fish. And as Jerry said, these entities, they're trying to elicit as much negative emotion out of you as they can. It's almost like they're sipping it up. They're drinking it in some way, or sucking it out of you in some way or shape or form. So as I'm going through all these tribulations, trials, or tests, it was like I was facing all these adversaries or prosecutors. And it wasn't always just about how horrible I was. At times it was about how horrible humanity is as a species as a whole. So I felt like I was acting almost as a advocate or a defense attorney for all of humanity with some of these attacks that I was going through. And the next attack was very interesting. And I said the tone or inflections were changed a little bit, or the vocabulary that was being used. It felt like it was different entities, not necessarily the same one doing all these attacks. It's like I was going through some sort of managerial hierarchy. And I remember the next attack was telling how worthless and pathetic humanity and I are, that our bodies are insignificant lumps of flesh, blood, bone, and muscle, destined to rotting, be eaten by worms when we die. And I counter-argued to them. I said, wait a second. You can't attack me for the shape or form of my body or humanity's form. I said, that was made by God, not by I said, you can't go after me for that. I had no control over that. And it was interesting because this adversarial attack stopped almost immediately. That only went on for about 2 weeks. And I realized, wow, my stance was very strong there. They didn't have a case, so they backed off right away. That gave me the indication that, wait, I can win against some of their arguments here. It was just so interesting they started throwing that at me. And I almost feel there's a little bit of hypocrisy, the way it was coming after myself and all of humanity for the nature of our physical form.
Cowards. Just such cowards, right?
Yeah. Gaslighting in a sense, bullies.
Yeah, total. Wow.
So I went through a whole bunch of these different tribulations, tests, and trials, and half of me is thinking that I'm mad. This is just my mind playing tricks on me. You know, maybe there's some subconscious desire to be some sort of hero for humanity, and this is what my mind is doing, playing these tricks on me. So I was going back and forth. I had to, at times, I was treating it as a true spiritual religious battle. at times I was viewing it as just pure madness and nothing more than that, pure psychosis. So I went through a assortment of these stages, and I'm at rock bottom at this point in time. It's like I'm dealing with these strong thoughts or voices that are constantly attacking, trying to get me to give up in life. And I remember this one attack, the final attack, trial of tribulation. Something was telling me that God does not exist. Give it up. God is a fairy tale. Your faith is stupid. It's almost like it was trying to totally destroy any sense of faith or belief that I had in God or higher power or higher consciousness. And I was almost at the point of accepting what they were saying. And if I accepted what they were saying, I probably would have killed myself, because I just felt like, what's the point of existence? As I said,
I want to bring up that again, that's another pattern. These things are anti-religious to everybody. They don't want them going to church, reading the Bible, praying. What kind of hallucination would be anti-religious? Doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
So I mentioned very many of these trials or tribulations were aspects of existential crises, different forms of it. So this final attack was trying to convince me that God does not exist. Give it up. There's no such thing as God. He or she is meaningless. So I was at my wit's end. I was at rock bottom. I started praying to God, or what I envisioned God to be, to give me a sign. I said, I need a sign that you exist, because I don't know if this is madness in my head. I don't know if this is a true religious or spiritual experience that I'm encountering, some sort of shamanic process. I needed to know that you exist. So I prayed the most intense praying I probably did in all my life, for about 2 weeks. I didn't tell God what the sign should be. I left it up to him or her. You know, if a priest had knocked on my door to say hello one day, I would have accepted that as a sign. If I saw a rabbi walking down the street, I would have accepted that as a sign. If I received a Bible or a Quran or some sort of a Buddhist text in the mail by mistake, I would have accepted that as a sign. I didn't care what it was. I just needed something. And then what occurred about 2 weeks after the most intense praying, it was a profound experience. It was a hallucination or vision that occurred. So I'm going to share my screen with you and the audience, and I can show you exactly what happened after I underwent 2 weeks of some of the most intense praying to God to give me a sign. So, Chantelle, if you'd like to pull up that screen, I can start the slideshow.
There we go.
Okay, can everybody see kind of the inside of a room there?
Yeah.
So this is what my room looked like. As I mentioned, I'd gone through 2 weeks of praying to God to give me a sign that he or she exists, that I needed to know that this wasn't just madness in my head, that there was something genuinely spiritual, religious going on here. So I woke up about 2 a.m. one morning with the feeling there was a presence in my room. It was very intense. I'm lying on my bed and I'm looking up at the ceiling light. That's a ceiling light fixture that was in my room at the time. I just felt like there's something in the room, but I couldn't see anything. I'm looking around. Whatever it was very powerful, what I was feeling. And then all of a sudden I start to see kind of this smokish, grayish, fog-like substance starting to enter the room. At first I thought it was an electrical fire, and I was getting ready to run out of the room, but then I realized, wait a second. This isn't occurring where the wires go into the light fixture. And this substance is not moving like smoke. It was moving almost like the way food coloring would move if you dropped it in a glass of water. It almost had like a flowing type of movement to it. And it wasn't coming out of the ceiling itself. Whereas smoke from an electrical fire would come out of the bottom of the ceiling itself, this was occurring in a plane about a foot below the ceiling level. So I'm seeing more and more of this fog or cloud-like essence entering the room. It was silverish, grayish, blackish. And then it dawned on me, I'm having a visual hallucination. Here it was. I was diagnosed with affective schizophrenic disorder about a year earlier, hearing all these very strong negative voices and thoughts in my head, going through some sort of existential crisis, tribulations or trials. And now I'm actually seeing something. Part of me is thinking, oh, great, my schizophrenia is getting worse. The other part of me, the scientist in me, is like, okay, let me see where this goes. Let me see what my crazy schizophrenic brain is going to show me here. So lying on my back, looking up, more and more of this cloud-like substance is entering the room. It's almost like a cloud is forming in the room. I'm watching it. And in the center of this cloud, I start to see kind of this dark portal or opening occurring. You can call it a gateway.
And on your pictures aren't following your verbal presentation. We're still back at your room.
Oh, really? Oh, my apologies. Let me see what's happening here.
There you go.
Were the slides changing?
No.
Okay, I will change. I will change this by hand then. Okay, so you see the little bit of the cloud there with the black portal on the inside?
Yeah.
Okay. And the portal started getting bigger and bigger. It was growing in size. And then I realized this cloud-like substance, it was actually coming in from the portal. Like I could see it flowing out from the inside periphery of the opening of this portal that opened up in my room. The portal was very dark. I couldn't really see into it. And I'm looking, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, I see these two serpentine or snake-like movements move from bottom to top within the portal. And I'm watching these things kind of move. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? I'm thinking, why am I seeing serpentine or snake-like movements? This makes no sense. It appeared to be two tails. I'm not sure if it was all from the same entity or there were multiple entities that I was seeing through this portal. The more and more the cloud came into the room, and it became very solid. And I was thinking, internally, my emotions were like, I was a little frightened. This is not normal reality. But I was more curious. I want to see where this goes. I was thinking, phew, those snake-like or serpentine entities, or the tails, are in that portal. They're not in my room, at least. But that thought was kind of premature, because the next thing I know, I start to see the snake-like movements in the cloud that had formed in my room. So I'm seeing this slithering going on. The tails are moving within the cloud, and the cloud is moving around it like fog as it's swirling around. Almost like this entity was exiting the portal and entering into the cloud. The next thing I know, the entity pops out of the cloud. And I was kind of taken aback a little bit. I was kind of laughing to myself because I was seeing snake-like movements. I was expecting to have this entity to come out of the cloud with some sort of snake-like or reptilian head on it. But it didn't. It had a mammalian head to it. It looked kind of lion or dog-like from the side. This image on the left is exactly what I saw. And then years later, about 2020 or so, I came across these items on the right-hand side on the internet. And these looked exactly like what I saw. I remember that this creature or entity had some sort of seam running down its side, almost like it had two tails that could act as one member. And if you look at the items on the right, that's from like the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th century AD. Those are from various amulets, which means our ancestors had encountered these entities before. So this entity goes by the name of Chnubis. That's one of the oldest names from ancient Egypt. So you're talking almost 4,000 years ago. The Gnostics, those that are familiar with Gnosticism refer to this entity as Yaldabaoth, Sockless, Semiel, the Demiurge. It goes by a few other names as well. In the lower right-hand corner, that's actually an amulet from the 3rd or 4th century. And you'll notice on the amulet, if you can see it that clearly enough, there's actually a seam that seems to run down the side of this entity. But it has a serpentine body and a mammalian face to it. So then the entity with the snake-like body turned and faced me directly. And its face from head on, it wasn't 100% a lion, but it was definitely lion-like the way it looked. It had a mane, had a muzzle, it had whiskers. I could even see facial stubble, imperfections on its face. And I remember its left eye looked like it was scratched or damaged. It might have even had been blind, its left eye, almost like something that's been in a few cat fights. It was kind of mangy looking, but I remember the body itself, the scales were very glossy black in color, and the underbelly was kind of a grayish underbelly. So it turned and faced me head on. And I was still, again, I was frightened, but more curious. It didn't look that ominous to me at this point in time, even though I knew this was not normal reality. Then all of a sudden, as it's coming at me, the face changed. It changed into something so hideous. It looked like an old man or old hag of decay. It was very prune-like, grayish, wrinkled. It could even have looked a little reptilian-like, in with the face of the old man or old hag of decay. And it seemed to open its mouth almost like it was howling at me or coming to devour me or eat my soul or something of that extent. I just remember at this point in time when its face suddenly changed right before my eyes, I became in a state of total fear and horror. Every cell in my body felt this evilness or terror of what was occurring here. I think I had goosebumps all over my body. I thought I was going to die. And I remember part of me was saying, I don't want to die feeling like this in such a state of horror and terror. If this is the final end of my existence, I didn't want to go out this way. The other part of me knew that fighting this thing would be pointless. This entity was way more powerful than I was. The fact it could come in through a portal or a gateway, come into a cloud and enter my room to come at me. So rather than fight it, I decided to do something very different. I said, okay, you seem to be very evil. You're coming at me. I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to lower my ego. I just projected love onto it. Now, I don't know if this idea to project love onto it came from my own thoughts or if something higher up had put that thought in my head to do that. But I remember upon projecting love onto this entity, it's almost like it was sending all this evil hatred and anger towards me. And I was just projecting love right back at it. It's almost like the two energies of its evilness and hatred was confronting my energy of love, going up against it. The next thing I know, it disappeared, pulverized, or vaporized. I just knew it was gone. It's almost like it came at me and then it just disappeared or pulverized. I didn't expect to survive this because I really felt like these things had actually materialized in my room. I know I refer to it as a visual hallucination or a vision, but I really truly believe that this entity materialized in my room, but I had no physical proof to show that they did. So it disappeared. I'm thinking to myself, I'm still alive. I'm still here. What's going on? And then I realized this ordeal was not over because now there's a new entity hovering overhead. And I remembered that it had a human face to it, and the face was sheer beauty, undescribable beauty. Now, I'm not an artist, so I kind of drew this as a porcelain mask-like look to it, but just imagine this is a beautiful, beautiful face. It was kind of porcelain-like, and I could see these energetic discharges fluttering behind it, and it almost appeared like the fluttering of wings. It could easily be interpreted as wings fluttering, but I remember there were energy discharges, there was probably either 3 or 4 pairs of what appeared like wing like movements around his face. The face was androgynous looking, but I felt like it was of a feminine nature. But I realized that whatever this newer entity was, it wasn't aware that I was in the room. So I'm looking at it, but I felt like it wasn't aware of me yet. And part of me was saying that, I'm a mere mortal. I shouldn't be seeing this stuff. This is from other realms. These are higher entities, and almost out of respect for its beauty, I was preparing to just run out of the room, but curiosity held me in place. So this other entity, sheer beauty, undescribable beauty, and I came across these images on the internet in the last few years. Keep in mind, I'm having this experience, this visual experience back in 1991. There was no internet back then. I wasn't into the occult. I wasn't reading anything other than the Bible. And this is some stuff I found on the internet recently just to kind of describe what it is that I saw. The lower left-hand corner, that's, I think, a seraph or seraphim. Looks very similar to what I saw in that second entity. So then all of a sudden that second entity opened its eyes and we're just staring at each other. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I figured that previous entity had appeared lion-like, came into the room, turned into something super horrific and scary to look at. I felt this beautiful entity was going to do the same thing, but we're just staring at each other. And it's almost like with this entity, it seemed like it was either had been imprisoned for a while and had just been freed and it did not know that it was free, or it was judging me, or it was feeling shame and trying to overcome it. But I just remember we're both like staring at each other. The wings are flapping back and forth. I didn't know what was going to happen next. Then all of a sudden, the entity smiles at me. I remember I even saw dimples form in the corner of its face. It smiled at me. And upon that smile, I just felt this wave of love, ecstasy, understanding, joy, bliss come from it onto me. It was almost saying like, everything's going to be okay. Don't be frightened. You're past the worst of what's going on. The next thing I know, I'm starting to have an out-of-body experience, like I'm rising out of my body, and I'm starting to merge with this beautiful faced entity. It's like we were becoming one. At the same time, this entity is going back in reverse. It's kind of rising up towards the ceiling, and I realize it's entering the portal. And as it's happening, I'm merging with this entity in a state of sheer ecstasy, joy, bliss, love, grace, all these positive emotions. And I'm merging with this entity. We're just about to cross into that portal or gateway that had formed in my room. The cloud had pretty much dissipated at this point in time. I didn't see it anymore. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And all of a sudden, I was put back to sleep. I remember everything went gray instantaneously, and then everything went dark. It wasn't like I fell back asleep. It was like something put me back to sleep, because I remember the distinct point of being kind of knocked out. And then everything went dark. The next thing I know, I woke up about 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning. I was in a state of religious shock. I'm like, what just happened? So I don't know if I had rescued that second entity, if he or she had rescued me. And there's many ways of interpreting what had occurred. That second entity could have been my higher self, my holy guardian angel. It could be what the Gnostics referred to as the Aeon Sophia. Many different ways of trying to interpret this stuff. I keep an open mind because I don't have solid answers, but I just know when you read some of the scriptures, in both the Gnostic scriptures and even the Orthodox scriptures, there's a lot of commonality with what I saw and what I encountered. Now, I had no knowledge of Gnosticism until about 2020. And again, all this stuff happened back in 1991. Now, I'm just going to read one more thing here, and this is from the Nag Hammadi library. This is actually one of the books found, one of the codices within the Nag Hammadi library. So the Apocryphon of John. And this text was written about the 2nd century AD. They think it was written probably about 185 of the Common Era. So this would have been before the Bible even formed. This is before the Council of Nicaea. This is back in the very early days of Christianity. And here's an actual English translation of a section of this text, the Apocryphon of John. Quote, "And when she saw the consequences of her desire, it changed into a form of a lion-faced serpent, and its eyes were like lightning fires which flash. She cast it away from her, outside that place, that no one of the immortal ones might see, for she had created in ignorance, and she surrounded it with a luminous cloud, and she placed a throne in the middle of the cloud, that no one might see it, except the Holy Spirit, who is called the Mother of the Living, and she called his name Yaldabaoth." So here it is. I see this lion-like faced entity, the serpentine body, come out of a cloud in my room. And this is a text from the 2nd century, which means our ancestors encountered these entities way back when.
Right.
Now, it's our interpretation of what these entities are that is so uncertain. But that was the start of my recovery from schizophrenia, because I would say that's the point where I crossed over from being a mad person and taking a mystical approach to this stuff. I realized that these entities were external of me, and I was able to stand up to them and confront them. They kind of lost the grip over me. The mere fact that they had to visually reveal themselves, they gave themselves away. And that's when I knew that these were not my internal thoughts, that this was a genuine, profound religious experience. It gave me back my will to live. It was proof that we are more than just molecules and chemistry, that we do have souls or spirits. We are spiritual beings. And unfortunately, science tends to negate a lot of this stuff. But I think as a species, we need to reconnect to some of the writings and scriptures of our ancestors to realize there is something to us way beyond our mortal bodies.
Yeah, we're spiritual beings, and psychology and psychiatry just completely ignore that. You know, they treat the physical body, they drug the physical brain, but you know, thoughts and feelings and memories, they're all energy. You know, just like the voices are energy. So what they're doing is it's like if you have a big magnet, you can't see that magnetic field. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it. For all practical purposes, according to our physical senses, it doesn't exist. You get a bottle of iron filings and you put it on that magnetic field. Now you can see it. And what psychiatry is trying to do is dump physical drugs on an energetic field and trying to dissipate it. Now they can gum it up, but they're not going to get rid of it. Their physical drugs do not work to get rid of energetic entities. These negative voices, they are energy. They're negative energy. You know, they're evil spirits. You don't get rid of them with physical drugs. You just gork the guy out so he doesn't care about them anymore, but they're not curing anybody.
Now, the interesting thing too, just from the observation of what occurred, when that entity with the serpentine body and the snake-like face, it didn't just appear in my room. It had to come in through a portal or gateway, enter in through some sort of cloud. Now, I don't know if this entity has the capability to make those portal and gateways, or if it knew how to navigate them. It knew where they were going to appear and it came in that way. But that's something from an observational scientific standpoint. It's like, wait a second, that thing didn't just randomly appear in the room. It had to make an entrance through some sort of portal or gateway. So there's something to that.
Yeah, these negative entities are around us all the time, and they get everybody. They don't just get schizophrenics. You know, you might be minding your own business, and all of a sudden you have this horrible thought come through your mind to do something you would never act on, and you're shocked that it even entered your mind. That did not come from you. You know, they constantly
test.
Yeah, they test. They see if you're going to buy it. They see how much control they have over you. And if you start doing what these negative thoughts tell you, you're going to get in more and more trouble. You're going to generate more negative emotional energy, and they're going to start feeding off you. They're like sharks in the ocean that smell blood. They go after the people that are most wounded, the severely sexually, physically, and emotionally abused patients. You know, they go after meth addicts. You know, they go after the weakest of the bunch. You know, and you know, if you don't realize their thoughts are not coming from you, you're behind the 8 ball. You know, you think those are your thoughts, you're in trouble. You know, Sherry Sweeney, my co-author that wrote our book, she says that all negative thoughts about yourself or anybody else come from the dark side. You know, they don't belong to you. Manuel Swedenborg, Christian mystic, he said none of your thoughts are your own. They either come in from heaven or they come in from hell, and you're the chooser. You choose which ones you want to listen to, which one you want to react to. And we all have that choice.
There's so many different ways of interpreting this stuff, and I guess go with whatever method heals you or makes our society better. And I think if there's any message out there for those dealing with schizophrenia, it's not a life sentence. It is curable. It is treatable. Once you recognize that those voices or negative thoughts in your head are not you, that it is something external, that's the beginning of your recovery and healing from it.
That's exactly right. That's critical. You have to know that they're not you. If you didn't think they're you, what are you going to do about it? You know, oh, I'm crazy. My mind is doing all this crazy stuff. I'm my own enemy. That's what they want you to think. They're coming in from outside you. They're coming in from a negative source. They want to destroy you. They are enemies.
Now, I was one of the lucky or fortunate ones. Like I didn't tell my counselor or psychologist about that visual hallucination because, number one, I didn't want them putting me on some sort of harder medicines or anything else like that. I hated feeling like I had to rely on these medications to get my brain stabilized. I felt like this was a genuine spiritual religious battle. I felt I had to face it head on, which many times I did. The other reason is I didn't want them to tell me, oh, it was just a random hallucination, because what I saw, what occurred, that was the only thing holding me together at that point in time. That was the foundation from which I was rebuilding myself as a human being and as an individual. And it's taken me a long time to talk about this stuff. I kept this inside me for a good, almost probably close to 3 decades, because I had to make sure that I had recovered as a schizophrenic. After I had that visual hallucination, I thought things were going to get worse. I thought I was going to have so many more of these occurring. Weeks went by, months, and years. I never had another visual hallucination like that ever since. And I'm living a very productive and fruitful life. I've been able to recover, but it's almost like a little bit of a duality, because you have to go through your daily existence of earning a living, paying your bills, and that sort of thing. Yet there's these other realms of existence. There are these non-corporeal entities out there, and you can't go and tell everybody about this stuff, because part of the population would just think that you're nuts, that you're crazy. But those that have encountered this stuff realize, no, I've had the same experiences. There's definitely something going on beyond our visual field of vision, beyond our spectrum, what we can see.
And the voices themselves will tell the patient, don't tell anybody about us. They'll tell them straight up. If you tell anybody, they'll think you're crazy. They won't believe you. They'll drug you up. They'll take you to the psychiatrist. You'll end up in a mental hospital. And if you look at it, there is no real positive outcome to schizophrenics telling people about their voices. They lose their friends. Their friends go, you're possessed, you're nuts, you're crazy, we don't want to be around you. They tell their parents, they drag them into a psychiatrist's office. The psychiatrist drugs them silly with these toxic drugs that don't get rid of anything. And if they go back to the psychiatrist and say, hey, I'm still hearing the voices, they increase those drugs and they feel even more gorked out. So it's very common for schizophrenics not to tell psychiatry the truth about what's going on and the voices they're hearing, because for the exact same thing Anon said, they will drug you more. They'll switch you to a more powerful drug. It's just a kaleidoscope of drugs that they just keep giving and giving and giving. None of them cure anything.
So in that regards, the entities are telling you the truth that, yeah, you will be in worse state if you speak to us about the psychologist about us. But Jerry's right. I remember those entities would tell me, if you ever tell anybody about this, you'll be locked up for the rest of your life in a psychiatric ward. You'll never get out again. Nobody's going to believe you. Everybody's going to disown you, think that you're mad and crazy. They're going to stay away from you. I heard all those them telling me all those things, but I feel like the statute of limitations has expired. It's now to speak up and talk about this stuff.
I'm glad you are. And you look at it from this true perspective that these voices are entities. They don't belong to the person. They are attacking the person. They absolutely hate babies. But psychiatry is doing the human race a grave disservice by publishing and advertising that these voices are mere hallucinations due to a chemical imbalance in the brain, which they have no evidence for and has been disproving. But they're still doing it. They're still teaching it in the universities. They're still publishing in the advertisements for antipsychotic drugs. They're still pushing that false notion. And like Anon said, and I fully agree, if you are going to recover from schizophrenia, you need to understand that those thoughts do not belong to you. That whatever those things are that are attacking you are not you. They're not your thoughts. They're coming from somewhere else. They're an enemy. Once you realize that, then you can split yourself off from them and you can look for ways to fight back. And there's a number of ways to fight back. They can't stand the 23rd Psalm. They're consummate liars. They lie about everything. All they want to do is keep you upset, and then they want to drain that negative emotional energy that they generate. So they're actually vampires. They're actually parasites. They're actually feeding off you. They want to get you upset, and then they feed off your energy. And you talk to schizophrenics, say, how do you feel before the voices come? They go, oh, okay, I feel okay. How do you feel after they come? Completely drained. No energy whatsoever. Right. And they didn't use it. They're usually laying in bed at 2, 3 in the morning, tossing and turning while being attacked by the voices. When they get up in the morning, they just have no energy.
Now, prior to having this experience, I always thought that like demons were the thing of Hollywood movies. But after this experience, I'll tell you, demons, or if you want to call them archons, they're real. But I also think there are benevolent entities out there as well. And you got to be careful to sort through which are which. And I think
discernment. The
benevolent entities will generally say things that seem to make logical sense of the right course of action. Whereas what I found working in the emergency room, they usually will only speak in words if you're in serious trouble, when on the verge of life and death, then they'll say something. But usually they speak in feelings, intuition, and serendipity. You just feel that you're doing something wrong, or you just feel like you should do something. They're not as blatant as these other voices that come in there and say, do this, do that, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're crazy, you're worthless. I mean, that's very common. I'm working with people all over the planet now in private practice. And one of the most common complaints they have is, I feel worthless. Something happened to them in their childhood that made them feel worthless, and they're going through their entire lives feeling worthless. Now, there's a new energetic therapy out now. Anon spoke of what happened when they put electricity through his brain. And I witnessed this also in the state hospital when they were running massive electric currents through people's brains. Those voices disappeared for a period of time. There's a new energetic therapy out that the mainstream media wants nothing to do with it. It's called the Mesa Energy Method. It's an energetic therapy. It will get rid of these negative identities, these negative thoughts that you carry with you. It will cure most psychological problems. I mean, cure, get rid of. They're gone within an hour. Before you try any of these toxic psychiatric drugs, go to causisminstitute.com and see if you can find a causism therapist who is free to work with you. It's a lot cheaper than going to a psychiatrist. The results are permanent. And it doesn't damage the brain.
It doesn't damage the brain.
It heals it, it cures it, fixes it.
Yeah, I was going to say it has the opposite effect. It actually raises your frequency substantially, which is exactly what is required.
Yes, that's www.causisminstitute.
Hang on, let me hang on.
CAUSISM.
Yeah.
Institute, INSTITUTE.
In all one word.
All one word. .com.
Or the MACE energy method, MACE. That'll bring it up as well.
Yeah.
Now, John Mace, who came up with this, you got it?
Yeah, a MACE energy method. Guys, I put this on, and I will put it on as well, on the thing. But it's also on my old interviews with you as well. Very effective. It's energy work. It's raising your frequency, because once your frequency rises, these things can't get hold of you anymore. It's that simple.
It takes away a lot of the negative stuff that they feed off of.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. And on that was an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. Because I think a lot of I sit here and I watch the chats, and it's amazing how many people I think have just benefited from hearing that, and identify with something they've been going through as well. And to know that they're not crazy, that this is what's going on, and that there is healing available. You are not sentenced to a lifetime of insanity, which is exactly what these creatures of the night want you to believe about yourself.
Yes, there's a number of ways to fight back against these things. And like I said, they absolutely hate the 23rd Psalm. I've had patients tell me that when you repeat the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. Now, why would a hallucination do that? And that's consistent.
Exactly. That should be a dead giveaway, right? That
should be a dead giveaway.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't need those toxic chemical meds. You really don't. I mean, once you decide that you want to heal, there's
some people
short-term usage.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes. Not for the rest of your life. And psychiatry is telling these poor people, schizophrenia is a life sentence. You got to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. You got to keep coming back and visit me, pay for office visits, pay for these toxic medications that cost, $800,000 a month to stay sane. And they cure nothing. Now, there are people who need those drugs. Yeah, there are people who need those drugs. Believe me, I've seen them. I've worked with them. They're so far out. They're so dangerous. They have to be on these drugs. But for the average person struggling with voices, what Anon says is true. It can be cured. You can fight back against these voices. You can weaken them. There's a program on our website, jerrymarzinsky.com. You go to articles. It's called the That's a Lie program that was developed by Sherry Sweeney, who also heard voices as a young woman. And she weakened them and got rid of them using that one program alone. You can find it under articles on my website.
Treat it as a spiritual battle. It's a fight for your soul is really what it's all about.
That's exactly right.
And we know right now we're in spiritual warfare. That's for sure what's happening. And this is what it's about. This is really what it's about. It's not about fighting somebody else. It's actually your own inner spiritual journey that we all have to take care of. Because we can take care of ourselves.
What's interesting also is if you go look at these patterns that I was telling you about on my website, there's 23 of them. Consistent patterns that these voices run. If they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. But if you look at those patterns, they're almost a one-to-one correlation between those negative patterns and what's coming out of the mainstream media right now in the Western world. I mean, it's the same entity on a macroscopic basis. Anti-religious, negative, fearful, fostering negative emotion. It's the same exact thing. There's maybe a couple of them that don't match, but otherwise, what's coming out of the mainstream media is the same thing that psychotics or schizophrenics are hearing. It's the same material.
And as Jerry
mentioned, see for yourself.
It's not just word salad. These voices talk in very coherent statements. I mean, I can remember having arguments in there with them internally in my head. Sometimes I decide to speak out loud to deal with them too. going back and forth on that. And I mean, I remember there's one tribulation that I went through. I didn't mention this earlier on, but one of them was saying how horrible humanity is, that they will never learn. And it started showing me all these scenes of what I encountered of violence that humanity has done, but it also brought up other scenes. Like, it was almost like a movie was playing in my head, or cinematography snapshots, various aspects of war and violence and horror and riots and destruction that humanity has caused. And these entities were showing it to me to try and prove that humanity is a worthless species. It doesn't deserve to exist. And I would argue against them. I would say, look, yeah, some human beings are like that, but not all. Some human beings are full of love, generosity, compassion, forgiveness. I said to them, you don't judge an entire species based on the actions of a few. So the real way around these negative entities to win this spiritual warfare is we got to implement some of the positive emotions, such as love, compassion,
Yes.
forgiveness,
Absolutely.
gratitude, or else we're going to get nowhere. And that's what a lot of the great philosophers and prophets of history have always put forth. It's really about love at the bottom line, healthy love, I
Yes.
should say.
Agreed. You got to get on a positive spiritual path and stay there. If you stall out, you're going to start sinking back again. You have to stay on a positive spiritual path and keep moving along it.
Right.
And, like Anon was saying, these things speak in complete sentences. I've watched patient after patient for years arguing with them, fighting with them, arguing back
Very
with them.
intelligent. They're very intelligent. They're
They're
super intelligent.
very devious, very sneaky. I watched one woman, she was leaving the hospital grounds, arguing against the voices, telling them she did not want to leave the hospital ground as she was leaving the hospital ground.
Sure.
They're not hallucinations.
I'm so grateful for you guys, honestly, and the information that you bring in. This for me is really, when we talk about these topics, and you guys are walking, talking proof of it. I mean, that for me is us as humans hitting the jackpot, because it's like we really, as I was saying earlier, it's our light. This is what brings in the light. This is our light that starts shining. They will do whatever they can to keep us oppressed and therefore possessed. It starts with oppression and then becomes possession, right? So, once we can transmute that or transcend it, and just kind of like break free of it, we then become the humans we're supposed to be, that radiate light, because we created from God's light. And once we radiate that, and when we're speaking to people who understand these entities, they are literally caught in the lower rung realms. They cannot create bodies for themselves, which is why they're going to attach and possess other bodies. Like they're going to do what they can to attach themselves, and therefore possess that body, because they are stuck here in the lower rungs. So that's why they hate us, because they're actually so damn jealous, because we have consciousness, we have light, we have beauty, we have love. And that's what we are created from. We created from the spark of love, which is what they have not been created. Well, we all are at some point. I don't know what happened to them that they ended up there. But, bottom line is we have that and they don't. So for us
you also have two guardian angels with you all the time, at least two. They can't help you unless you ask. You have to ask them. They're not allowed to interfere with your free will. So they got to sit by and watch all these horrible things happen to you. If you don't ask them for help, they can't interfere.
Right. So true. Because we live in a planet of free will. We have free will and choice here.
And as you mentioned, we all have a divine spark within us. Just we have to learn how to fan the flames of that divine spark in us to kind of find our true self. Spark it up.
Yeah.
Help it to grow, help it to flourish, nurture it.
Yeah. And that we do through love and doing the things that we enjoy doing. So when we do what we love and love what we do, everything else becomes that amazing, like, snowball effect, right? And then we gather that momentum that takes us to and as you say, enables us to follow that beautiful spiritual path. Now, what's going to do it for us? We have to do it ourselves, right?
Yeah,
We're not in the place where we get...
Don't get blinded by the materialism around you.
Exactly.
That will take you down. If you're blinded by the physical world, because you're a spiritual being in a physical body,
right.
Don't get obsessed with all the material stuff here, because it'll just take you away from your spirituality.
Well, for sure, because that's
Jesus even said, to be in this world but not of it.
Right.
And that's I mean, when you look at just the world where it is right now, look at all the trimmings and trappings that have been created. It's exactly what you said, Jerry. We look at the trimmings and the trappings that they've created to keep us away from our true selves. I mean, look at the internet, look at the vanity. I mean, the amount of, if and especially women and lots of men nowadays I don't mean don't take care of yourself or look good, whatever, of course, that's but when we look at the beauty industry, if every woman decided tomorrow that I loved myself in the way that I am, can you imagine how many industries would go out of business like that? Because they literally, they're feeding off our fears. Then you've got this anti-aging cream, and then you've got that, I don't even know what these things are. At the end of the day, when you love yourself, you go for walks, you exercise, you keep yourself healthy, you don't need anything other than very little. We all need very little, actually, of these existential things. And it's true, once we can just reconnect back to the spirit, to each other, our loved ones, our communities, we build up the communities again and not get caught up. I talk about this all the time. How many people walk around on their cell phones? They don't even look what's around them anymore. They are so disconnected from life. Your cell phone is there for a purpose. Yes, use it when you need to. But let's not disconnect. We've got to find that balance again. We've got to find that balance. And we've lost the balance, which is why this stuff has happened. But when we find
I have hope, though.
again,
I do have hope. I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that. And things go in cycles, too. One generation may be all on their cell phones. Future generations might not want to have anything to do with them, because it's not cool anymore, because my grandparents had those,
Yeah. Well, let's hope they're not having chips all over. Little chips.
Implants.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. What a great conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Chantelle,
and I really enjoyed it.
If I may, I did write a book kind of based on my search for truth and wisdom. That's kind of what got me to this point of reaching out to Jerry. And the book is called Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10. And it took me about 2 decades to write it, but it was kind of like my search for truth and religion and what it's all about. It's got a very positive message in there. So for those on their journey of trying to understand their soul, this book is a good introductory manual to help out with that. And I have a website. It's asteroxrising.com. It's spelled AST.
Let me just write.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that the book is on there. Otherwise, what I can do is put the link. Asterox, AST
EROX
OX, yeah.
Rising.com.
Rising.com.
Asteroxrising.com. That's the website that has the book for those that are interested in looking into it.
So I just want to make sure ASTEROX rising.com.
ASTEROX rising.com.
There we go. And then please send me your links, Anon. And then what I will do is I will put the link for your book and everything else into the description area as well. So anyone
I will certainly do that,
who then wants to, I would love to. You want to hold your book up again so that people can maybe see it?
Sure.
And if you just give me the title, then I can put it into the chat. Revelations on
Interstellar Highway 10.
Revelations on Interstellar Highway Is it available on your website or?
It is. Well, you can buy it through my website. It's available in ebook format or paperback format. And there's links on my website
Perfect.
that'll take you there.
There we go. That's the name. Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10. Yeah, I was going to say that's a cool title. For sure. And if you can just, if you want to send me the details as well, and I'll just put it into the description area, and I'll put the links in there so whoever wants, and especially people watching after the show as well.
Okay. I will do that. Jerry has his book as well.
Yes. Sherry and I wrote this book, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind.
An amazing journey.
If you want to learn about how we determined that the voices were not hallucinations, but actual entities, it's in here. Now, Sherry, my co-author, she was hearing voices when she was a young woman. And we got to talking one day and we go, the world needs to know about this. We need to write about it and let them know. Okay, this is available on my website too, at jerrymarzinsky.com. It's also available on Amazon.
Fantastic. I'm just going to also put your website, jerrymarzinsky.com. Okay, so I'm giving all of you, just popping it in here into the chats, but I will also be having it be putting all the information into the description area of the recording as well. Very, very, very important information, and I'm very happy to be sharing this information with you guys as well. Really, very cool. Appreciate you very much. And thank you both for what you do. You really are a gift and a blessing to humanity. And I know it can't be easy, Anon coming forward, especially with information like that as well. Jerry, I know you've certainly had your struggles with the system.
Yeah. Still struggling with the system.
I was going to say, none of us get off scot-free, but folk like yourself, you know, when you're breaking through those types of barriers, gosh, it's a different type of world, right? So,
and Chantelle, thank you for having a platform like this for Jerry and I to present our stories, because without people like you, we would have nowhere to tell our stories, to get the word out there.
Yeah, we would be yelling in the wilderness.
Well, I live next to a town called Wilderness, and it's very beautiful, so you can come yell yeah anytime. I think you guys should come visit South Africa and come and tell your story anyway. But I'm going to talk to you about that. Don't worry. I've got my plans. So I want to just say thank you again, Jerry and Anon. And I want to say thank you to all our amazing listeners, viewers, same thing. It's always such a pleasure having you guys in here participating, and just, yeah, such a cool bunch of people that support. I must say we've got a really good little family on our platform here. So really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow again with other shows. We got my friend Yana at 1 o'clock my time, and then Caleb Jade in the evening again, hopefully. Cool. Thank you, everybody. God bless. Take good care of yourselves. See you soon.
Take care.